My father was a very, very famous explorer, and he loved Egypt so much, he married my mother, who was an Egyptian.
Hello, welcome back to Cine Chat. Today we are doing our Father's Day episode.
Mm-hmm.
We are doing exactly what we did with the Mother's Day episode. We have asked our dads for 3 movies that they really like or recommend, and we have sat and watched them. And I think we're both the same, weren't we? We'd seen 1 and hadn't seen 2, is that right?
Yeah, 2 were new.
There's 2 of your dads I didn't even know, so...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which I was quite surprised about.
Yeah, one of them in particular, I was like, what?
Yeah.
Never even heard of it, which is, yes, unusual for me. And there was one of my dad's as well I had never even heard of. And
Yeah, I don't
hadn't
think
heard
anyone's
him
ever
talk
seen
about
that.
either. So it was,
Just
it
made it up.
wasn't what I was expecting at all.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just going to start off by talking a little bit about our dads and their movie habits. So what's your dad's movie habits like, Matt?
Well, quite broad and quite far-reaching, I would say. My dad's been around for an extremely long time. I mean,
I hope he doesn't listen to
he'll
this
call
and
me a
get
cheeky
offended.
git after this. Yeah. Well, his age begins with a 7 now, so he's actually experienced a lot there. And he's quite good in a way at pinpointing exactly when and where he saw some films as well, which is quite impressive. But I guess also speaks volumes about cinema's ability to create memories and, memorable experiences. The fact that he can pinpoint, oh yeah, I watched this in 1962 at the Odeon Cinema in Bolton. It's just like, oh, okay.
Wow.
In terms of genres, the one that comes into my head straight away is westerns. He even told me, he said, I've got about 30 favourites.
Wow,
which is quite,
just in the
quite a
Western
lot.
genre. That's
yeah,
impressive.
but it's one of those genres where they made so many, and a lot of them are quite similar, I suppose.
Yeah.
They're the same actors, the same premises,
Yeah.
things like that. But he's also a big fan of Native American culture as well.
Yeah.
On the shortlist for his films was Dances with Wolves, which is a more modern example, but I'll be doing another Western today. Other than that, yeah, anything that's historical, war-based or epic, things with gladiators and swords and sandals or Spartans.
Yeah.
And fantasy stuff, I think, as well. Again, he mentioned Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter on his shortlist, but I said we'd do them next year. And yeah, all sorts of mythological things, monsters and titans and barbarians and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But there was lots of family stuff we'd watch when we were children as well. Wizard of Oz and Bedknobs and Broomsticks. And, The Indian in the Cupboard. I don't know if anyone's ever seen that. That was one we watched.
I've heard of it, but I've never seen it. This one passed me by, I'm afraid. So I've heard of it multiple times, but I've never watched it.
I don't know if it's very good or not. I'd have to look back at it, in hindsight.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, he watches loads. He probably watches more than I do.
Wow. Well, that's saying something.
And unlike a lot of senior citizens, just put here in inverted commas, he enjoys quite a lot of the new stuff as much as the old stuff. But he just has really bad habits of not checking first whether or not a film's good before he watches it. So often he'll say to me, I watched this thing. I was like, oh yeah, and he went, yeah, don't watch it. But yeah, he's definitely part of the reason I got into making films. So I imagine he's probably one of the reasons I watch so much as well.
Yeah.
Because he used to make a lot of things when he was younger. And yeah, he can tell me afterwards whether I've characterised him well or not. Is yours as easy to summarise?
Mine's actually quite similar, to be honest. I can't pinpoint really certain ones in particular. He was much more of a television watcher. I can picture a lot more of those. But his movies tended to sit in the same area, so we always watch things like Dad's Army and MASH, things like that. So he was big on the war stuff. But westerns as well. I didn't know who John Wayne was until I watched films with my dad. Actually, something that does come to mind is the Carry On films. They were he would put them on if they
There's
were
worse
on
things
telly.
to have on, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, my husband hates them, so we never watch anything like that. But I absolutely love Carry On. So I loved them growing up. He likes maybe not fantasy so much. It's more sci-fi for him. Like God, the amount of episodes of Star Trek I watched growing up reluctantly, I might add,
Yeah.
very reluctantly. So, he's seen the films and anything of that type, like stuff like Oblivion when that came out with Tom Cruise and things like that. He would, sit and watch that. But he's not a movie goer. He doesn't go to the cinema at all.
Right.
He used to take us to the cinema on a weekend because my mum used to work night shifts on a Saturday night, so he had to get us out of the house on a Sunday so that we wouldn't wake her up. So the cinema was a place that we used to go to. So he saw a lot of like family films with us. I do remember one instance we went to see Peter Pan, the one that came out in 2003.
I love that one.
Yeah, he fell asleep in that one.
Oh.
You
No.
could hear him snoring. Yeah, he obviously couldn't get on board with that one. He is very similar. Westerns, war films, sci-fi, fantasy, things like that. But like I say, he's not a cinema goer. But I think he does like to sit down and watch a movie every now and again.
Fair enough. So the films that you've been picked today, then?
Yes.
Were you pleased with with what you were given, or
no?
Or not? You weren't.
1 out of 3. I was pleased.
Right.
with,
Okay.
But, one of them I've seen before and really like. One of them I had never heard of, and the other one I was like, oh god. But I haven't seen it, and it's on my list, so I'll get it over with. That was my attitude to the films. What about you?
Oh, okay. No, I'm really happy with my selection. There was 2 that, like we said earlier, I haven't seen. I had a bit more influence over one than the others, but I think that's only fair. I did that with my mum. We got the full Monty in.
My dad, we'd done the Julia Roberts episode the week before, and it was like, oh, well, I really like Pretty Woman. I was like, well, we can't do Pretty Woman. We literally just did that when he went. And then my mum went, well, he likes Notting Hill. And I said, no, nothing Julia Roberts. Like, we can't do anything Julia Roberts.
I don't think I'll ever watch a Julia Roberts film again for as long as I live. I've watched enough now. Watched enough. Oh, dear.
So, are we going to start then? Should we start with
your
first one?
Happy to. Okay, this one's quite plot heavy. So, in a way, I'm going to try and skim through the plot first. Otherwise, nothing else will make sense. This is a film we watch almost every Saturday night at home.
Wow.
With Maltesers. I remember it distinctly. And this is The Mummy from 1999.
Classic, love it.
And something about this, I thought, oh, that's a really well-made film, actually. Who wrote this and who directed this? It was directed by a guy called Stephen Sommers, and he's only really done like The Mummy Returns, and Van Helsing that I can think of that was notable.
I really enjoyed Van Helsing. Now, I remember my dad taking us to see that.
Yeah, he likes that one too. So, in terms of plot, there's kind of like a plot before the plot, so I'm going to just try and explain it. So the film opens in the ancient Egyptian city of Thebes in the years 1290 BC, so it's a long time ago. High priest Imhotep is having an affair with Anaxunamun, who's the mistress of Pharaoh Seti I. But they are discovered, they kill him, and then Anaxunamun kills herself, knowing that Imhotep can resurrect her because he's like the keeper of the dead. It's all very there's lots of magic and spells and stuff. So, yeah, he does that. He breaks into her crypt and he takes her body to Hamunaptra, which is the city of the dead, where he must read from the Black Book of the Dead in a ritual to bring her soul back from the afterlife. But it's all interrupted by Pharaoh's bodyguards, and he's condemned to be mummified in the worst way possible. So a curse is placed upon him, whereby if he's ever released, he would arise an unholy flesh-eater with the glory of invincibility and bring with him the 10 plagues of Egypt. And that's kind of where the prologue, I guess, sort of finishes. So 3,000 years later, a woman called Evelyn, who's an aspiring Egyptologist, and she's working in Cairo's Museum of Antiquities. Her and her brother have discovered an artifact with a map hidden inside it. Well, they've actually stolen it from Rick O'Connell, who was a corporal in the French Foreign Legion, who's now serving time in Cairo prison. And he found this artifact when he was out at Hamunaptra, this city that has kind of been lost. So they bargain for his freedom on the promise that he'll take them there. And at the same time, how am I doing on this? But at the same time, Rick's acquaintance from the war, Benny, is leading an expedition of Americans at the same time, who are sort of treasure hunters. Long story short, they ignore all the warnings to leave the city once they get there.
Always do.
Yep. They accidentally discover and open Imhotep's sarcophagus. The Americans discover the Book of the Dead. Evie accidentally reads from it. They wake him up and they unleash his curse. He will never eat, he will never sleep, and he will never stop. So that's kind of the premise.
Absolutely awesome, though.
Oh, it's amazing. it's one of the best films ever.
Absolutely love it. Do you know what? I didn't see it until I was at university. I'd never seen it.
Really?
Yeah, I was at university the first time I watched it, and I was like, "How have I not seen this movie? This is excellent!" Absolutely loved it.
Yeah, well, we've been watching it since. Me and my sister watched it since we were way too young. I'm sure.
I can imagine it being quite scary, actually.
That's one of the things I like about it. I think the reason we watched it so often and that the novelty didn't wear off is because it's kind of a comedy. You know, there's lots of one-liners, and
Yeah.
a lot of the supporting cast are quite funny as well. So John Hannah, who plays Evie's brother Jonathan, and Kevin J. O'Connor plays Benny, and they're all sort of bumbling and
it's a very well cast movie.
yeah, and there's lots of visual comedy as well.
Yeah.
And there's a sort of a Brits versus Americans banter. There's lots of elements, but at the same time, you know, you've got the love story between Rick and Evie. They're kind of like Tarzan and Jane, aren't they? George and Ursula. Then there's a horror aspect, a fantasy aspect, the whole treasure hunt, explorer aspect, adventure, action. So it kind of has a bit of everything.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's perfectly cast. So as Rick, you've got Brendan Fraser, who I think was probably at the height of his golden age.
That
here.
point, yeah.
But he's everything you could want as a quintessential action hero.
Yeah.
It's a bit like George of the Jungle and Indiana Jones and Lara Croft, and he's cool and dashing and swashbuckling and wisecracking and confident. But on the other side, you've got Rachel Weisz as Evie, who I think was an absolute revelation.
Oh, she's fabulous. Yeah. She didn't really continue doing films like this either, because this was like a blockbuster part.
No,
she doesn't do blockbusters really. I think she's going to be in Black Widow.
She's in Black Widow,
which I think is the first time really that she's been in anything that big since The Mummy.
Yeah.
She like kind of veered off and started making like Oscar films and smaller movies, and I just loved her in this.
She's endearing, I think, because she's clumsy and she's uncool.
Yeah.
And, you know, she's a bookworm, you know, which, you know, typically you wouldn't associate with a heroine lead. But actually what happens is it's a massive win for women who read. And,
yeah,
you know,
well, unless you're reading the Book of the Dead, you know.
That's what, yeah, she should have known better then. She'd been drinking. But yeah, she can read and write ancient Egyptian. She can decipher hieroglyphics. Her knowledge of history, being a librarian, knows no bounds. So yeah, I think she was an absolute revelation in this film, and I've loved her ever since.
Yeah.
Just a note on the CGI, really, because this was 1999, so only 2 years after Titanic, same year as Matrix, the two films I use as the marker.
Yeah, it's not them.
Not quite, but I don't know, look at the opening scene, you know, where it comes down from the sun over the pyramids and the great big Sphinx is being erected and the people have been composited into the scene. And it goes right across the landscape. I think it's very good.
I feel like the first one was better.
Oh, yeah.
I think what they tried to do in the others didn't work as well.
Yeah.
It kind of lost that flawless thing that I feel the first one has.
The budget for the first film was $80 million. They only used about 62 million, according to the director, but 15 million went on the special effects.
Wow.
Which I think was a big gamble at the time. And a general note about the production design. You know, Egypt lends itself very well to visually pleasing environments and things like that. But, you know, the colours, got the sun and the sand and fire and that sort of orange glow that the whole film has, I just really like. And then the last thing I can say is the music. And I don't know why no one talks about the music from The Mummy. I think it's one of the best soundtracks ever written.
Brilliant. Yeah, I really like it.
So this was by Jerry Goldsmith, who, you know, I knew the name and I recognised him because we did Alien a few weeks ago. But hear this. Okay, Jerry Goldsmith, 18 Oscar nominations, 9 Golden Globe nominations, 6 Grammys, 5 Emmys, 4 BAFTAs, 17 Saturn Awards, which is the horror sci-fi fantasy awards, for the likes of The Mummy, Alien, Chinatown, Mulan, Poltergeist, Gremlins, Sleeping with the Enemy, LA Confidential, Star Trek Basic Instinct, Total Recall, and The Omen, which was the only Oscar he won.
Wow.
I just think, whoa. I think what's good about this is that the film has a theme as well.
Yeah.
It's kind of iconic and you can't mistake it for anything else.
Yeah.
It sort of tells the story. And yeah, there was a sequel that wasn't as good, and then there was a threequel that wasn't as good as the sequel. So,
yep.
Yeah. That's kind of my summary. It's one of my favourite films, it's got to be. We watched it so many times.
It's definitely high up on mine. Definitely. Love that movie.
It's a good one.
Well, my first one, I should say we're going in kind of backwards order, aren't we? You're going from newest to oldest, and I'm going from oldest to newest. So
yeah.
My first one is the one that I'd never heard of, 633 Squadron, which was made in 1964. It's a British war movie, so it's your standard, Britain's take on the Nazis to, scupper the plans with this mission, all that kind of thing. I now know where one of my dad's favourite tunes comes from. He used to play this tune all the time. And I should mention that he likes his music loud. So when he put it on, it's usually a Sunday morning around about 10:30, 11 o'clock, which in your teenage years, you are still asleep then. He would very often wake me up with music blasting from downstairs, and this is one of the tunes he used to play. So the film came on, and I should say this tune is in the entire movie. It's like over and over.
Oh, no.
It's like huge. It's this huge, theme every time they
You're
fly.
getting flashbacks.
And, yeah. So I was
Flashbacks
like,
of being a teenager.
so when it came on, I was like, oh, well, that explains something. So I know where it comes from now. So basically the plot of this film is an RAF squadron is assigned to it's absolutely mental. It doesn't make much sense at all. They have to go to destroy this factory in Norway, which is going to be creating these rocket fuel things for rockets that are going to be used against the English during D-Day. But they're not to take out the factory because apparently the factory is bomb-proof. I didn't know that was a thing, but apparently it is. And what they're going to do instead is they're going to bomb the side of a mountain, which kind of is overhanging this factory. They're going to bomb it multiple times so that it falls off on top of the factory and
on
destroys
top of the factory.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's the, so it's quite difficult. So they have to like kind of fly really low through this canyon, of which there's loads of gunners on both sides. And so they've got to fly really low through it, and then they've got to like kind of veer over to like, tilt the plane, drop the bob at a certain angle, and then pull up and over the cliffs. So it's like, oh, right, okay. Right. So that's the plan. So this film, it is one of those British films at the time that always had an American lead, even though it's like British war. There's an American in there as well. So obviously that's to appeal to the overseas audiences. And in this case, it's Cliff Robertson, who, if you don't know who that is, it's Uncle Ben from Spider-Man.
That's right.
Yes.
That's it.
And he plays Wing Commander Roy Grant. So he's the skipper in charge. And then you've also got George Chakiris, who was made famous in West Side Story. He played the leader of the Sharks. Were the Sharks the Puerto Rican ones? Yeah, he was the leader of them. And he's from Norway in this. And he's one of the leaders of the resistance against the Nazis. And then you've got his sister, who is played by Maria Pershey. Never heard of her in my entire life. She's like a blonde bombshell, kind of, but in that kind of sweet foreign way, not the sex pot way, but very, very, very pretty girl. And basically she falls in love with the lead, and there's lots of cliches from your standard British war movies at the time. Typical gorgeous actress fall in love with the lead after they've just met, dramatic music when the Germans are on screen, all that kind of thing. It was a funny film because there's a lot of wordless scenes in it that are just like the plane flying the plane with a theme tune over the top. It actually reminded me a little bit of Top Gun. Now I think about it, because there's a lot of scenes in Top Gun where it's just the music on and you're watching the flying and the effects and you see the actors in the cockpit and all that. There's a lot of that, but I've got to say, I will be having words with my dad today because I was not impressed with this movie. It just ended. I was quite getting quite into it, and the mission was, they got through it, and obviously it was a success because you can't have that. But it just ended.
Yeah, you can't cope with an ambiguous ending.
Honestly, I'm not kidding. Right? Honestly, it's spoiler. So if you want to stop and go away for 30 seconds, the entire squadron died, apart from the captain. Obviously they get out of this burning plane. The guy comes and helps them get out, and then his right hand man says, are you okay, Skipper? And he goes, everything hurts, and then he just kind of faints, or you assume he faints. And then it goes back to the bloody headquarters of British, and this guy says to the lead man, he goes, well, what was it all for? Was it worth it? And he goes, yes, it was worth it. And he goes, what will we say about this? And he goes, that it was a successful mission. And the other guy goes, but they probably all died. And he goes, you can't kill a squadron. And that's it. It just fucking ends. He doesn't get back to the girl. You don't find out what happened. It's just, there was a bit where George Chakiris, he gets captured by the Nazis and tortured. So the leader, he has to go in and bomb the headquarters because they don't want him giving away what their plan is to come and you know, attack the guys. So he just bomb it. And I thought, oh, well, you know, he's going to get out, you know, because he's the second lead. You know, he'll come back and it'll be fine. No. He must have just died. He did actually get blown up because they just don't come back and tell you anything. I was furious. So I will be having strong words because I was not impressed.
Good start then.
I was with it all the way until like it literally just ended, and I was like, "What?" I literally said out loud, "I was like, what? What the? How?" I was not amused.
Yeah, well, Mary, you can't kill a squadron. I mean,
and just end and cut. So that was my first one. I was with the film most of the way until that. I wasn't on board with that.
Oh dear.
So your second one then, probably more successful than mine.
Oh, how can I follow that?
I know. How do you follow that?
Okay, this was the Western that I was referring to at the beginning, but it's a little bit different. So this is Jeremiah Johnson, which my dad said is his favourite Western. Of the 30 Westerns that he said were his favourite.
I hadn't heard of this.
Yeah, I think you'd like this. So this is from 1972 and it's directed by Sidney Pollack. And I cringed straight away because I saw Sidney Pollack and I saw Robert Redford's names. I thought, oh God, it's going to be Out of Africa. Isn't it? It's going to be that kind of film. It's not. It's slightly different from The Mummy in that the plot isn't really the focus, I guess. But I'll give a summary anyway. So it's set in the mid-1800s in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, and the story's somewhat narrated, which is a bit unusual actually. It's a bit like a campfire folk tale, but through a song, which I believe is called The Legend of Jeremiah Johnson.
Okay.
The different verses sort of appear at intervals throughout the film, commenting on like the beginning, middle, and end. So Robert Redford's character, Jeremiah Johnson, is quite ambiguous. So this is why the music's important, because through this song we learn most stuff about his character. The very first thing that the lyrics say are, Jeremiah Johnson made his way into the mountains, betting on forgetting all the troubles that he knew. A mountain man's a lonely man, and he leaves a life behind, da-da-da.
Yeah.
There's hints from his clothing to begin with that he was a soldier, maybe even a deserter of the Mexican War, but it's vague. And what is clear from the lyrics is that he's leaving his old life behind. He's disappearing from civilization to live his life as a mountain man, a life of solitude, basically.
Okay.
I think it's important to note that this film was obviously made during the Vietnam War, and a lot of American cinema at the time was characterized by sort of disillusionment and, you know, radical questioning of inherited values and things like that. And the characters tended to be loners and outsiders or even misfits. So it definitely fits into that kind of genre. Later in the film, he actually asks a passing troop of US Army cavalry, how's the war going? And when they tell him that it's over and he asks who won, we don't actually get the reply. It cuts away. I think that's really important because there's an implication there that there's no winners in war.
So it's actually set in the 1960s?
No, the film was made in 1972, but it's set in the mid-1800s, the Mexican War.
Right, okay, I'm with you.
So they're kind of using a story that references the period of that war to make a comment about the current climate, basically. The other thing the song tells us is it ought to have been different, but oftentimes you find that the story doesn't always go the way you had in mind. Jeremiah's story was that kind. So what is the story then? Unlike a lot of westerns, like your classic cowboys and Indians stories, or your John Waynes and your John Fords and all that stuff, it's much more of a revisionist western in the sense that, you know, heroes and villains, good and bad, right and wrong, are just blurred, and conflict isn't the focus. It's about this man and his journey.
Yeah.
It put me in mind of Robert Altman films like McCabe and Mrs. Miller and The Long Goodbye, in a sense, as well. Again, from the same era. So yeah, the film essentially chronicles the different characters that he meets in the mountains. It's quite episodic in that sense. So those that help him and those that he helps in return, and then there's a few that sort of unexpectedly become his family, and he sort of creates a new idyllic life that is miles away from the one of isolation that he sought out to find. And I imagine my dad likes this a lot. And I can tell that because right now I can see him in his caravan now, which is a bit like a rural cabin with a little garden and a pond, and he's got his little bow and arrow and log burner and things like that. So yeah, just to give a couple of examples, like I said, by way of plot, there's not a lot really that goes on, but he meets a lot of people. So the first person he meets is a frozen corpse, actually, who's got like a little, he's got like a will like written up and pinned to him, basically donating his rifle to whoever finds him. Then he meets a slightly mad mountain man known as Bear Claw, who teaches him how to hunt and survive. And then he meets a woman maddened by grief because a Native American tribe has killed all of her family except her son, who she forces Jeremiah to adopt.
Hang on a second. So he went into the mountains to live alone without already knowing how to hunt and look after himself whilst he was there.
Kind of, yeah.
That was very well thought out.
2 months into his journey, it's winter, and there's quite a lot of humour actually. Like he's learning how to fish. Like he ends up diving in himself and using his hands. And he's making a fire, and snow falls off the tree and puts his fire out and things like that. It's quite light-hearted in that sense. The other person that he meets is the daughter of the chief of a different tribe, and he accidentally finds himself married to her. But it's not as crazy as it sounds. It's quite a relaxed, peaceful film, and it's like his spiritual journey. And like the song says, the story doesn't go the way you expect it to. So it's quite nice just to sort of be with him on his journey as things happen. Things just happen, like life just sort of happened to him. So that's about 70% of the film, and at this point we get an intermission, which I believe is just in the restored version that I saw.
Yeah.
After this, the tone changes quite dramatically. Quite early on, Jeremiah is aware that the land that he's on is basically territory for this Crow tribe.
Yeah.
But he works hard to sort of just make peace so that he can coexist with them. But there's a very quick moment of oversight which has some massive repercussions for him, and it becomes a much sadder film after that. I won't go into details, but that's kind of what factors into the fact that we're being narrated this like it's a legend, the legend of Jeremiah Johnson, the man in the mountains and what happened to him. So really dead quick shout outs. The humour I thought was really good in the first 70% of the film.
Yeah.
The landscapes are fantastic. It was filmed in the national parks and mountains of Utah. Apparently it had never been accessed before except by mountain men, so it's like untouched natural beauty. It looks great. There's not a lot of music despite the song that you hear at various points, but most of the time you're listening to the wind or horses' hooves or footsteps in the snow and rivers and cutting wood and birds, so that you feel like you're really there.
Yeah.
My only complaint is that it feels a bit uneven. And I say this knowing that a lot of the films made in this period were meant to be quite provocative, and they would subvert narrative logic anyway to mirror the unpredictability and the unrest of the time. But that whole second half where things change, all of a sudden you're getting montages. Up until this point you'd been with him every step of the way and you knew the time progression, how long he'd been there, and then it kind of just blurs a little bit. So the second half, even though it's not really a half, feels comparatively quite rushed. I wished it was even half an hour longer and then took its time. But like I say, I get the films of that time weren't always meant to be satisfying. And I think that's just about it.
Wow.
I think you'd really like it.
Yeah.
There's something about it that it's got an atmosphere about it that's the fact that it's nice to look at as well helps. He's just trying to find a new life, but new life finds him, I suppose.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think you'd like it. I really do.
Should give that one a go.
It's not your traditional Western. So, good recommendation, Dad. I enjoyed that one. That was like Zulu to me. That was like watching Zulu for my mum's one.
Oh, good. Yeah. Well, okay, so my next one was Risky Business from 1983. Basically the film that put Tom Cruise on the map. So, I hadn't seen this before, but it was on my list to watch. Thought I had a bit of an idea about what it was about, which I sort of kind of did, but then really didn't.
The reality was very different.
So I started watching this, and I knew immediately, pretty much from almost the beginning, exactly why my dad liked this film. He was 19 in 1983, and this is literally every teenage boy's fantasy movie until it's not. It's I will do not hesitate to say I felt extremely uncomfortable watching this movie, knowing exactly why my dad will have enjoyed watching it at 19 years old. It was a very hard watch for me. Basically, the plot of this movie is completely and utterly unrealistic, and the guy's an idiot. So he is a Chicago teenager. His parents have gone away and left him in the house, and he's literally just getting ready to take his tests and choosing a college, trying to get into the best one possible. And he gets talked into by a friend doing something wild, and he phones this girl to come. It's obviously a prostitute, and it's Rebecca De Mornay plays the part. Now, my problem started with this because I don't really like Rebecca De Mornay very much at all. I find her very wooden, very cold. I just can't get into it. So that was my first problem. So he obviously sleeps with this woman. You don't see anything, but you see things, which I really wish I hadn't seen. There's a scene where the doors kind of blow open in the wind and the leaves. Honestly, it's like, wow, okay. Very inappropriate, I thought. So this happens, and then the next day he leaves her and goes to school. Leaves her in the house because she won't leave. So he goes to school and leaves her there, and when he comes home, this priceless like crystal egg thing that his mother has on the fireplace is gone.
Oh, okay.
And she's gone, and it just kind of goes bad to worse because he gets back in touch with her, and doesn't get the egg back, and then he ends up like getting involved with her pimp person who's played by Joe Pantoliano.
Oh yeah, from Memento.
He's been in tons and tons of things, and he actually had hair in this as well. It was weird. It was like, so he's in it, and it just literally it gets worse and worse and worse, like to the point where at the end he comes back into his house and there's nothing in the house.
Oh dear.
He had this one big night where to like make some money that had all of the girls that she knew came, and he literally got all the lads he knows to pay for sex in his house. It's huge. It made thousands of dollars a night, but he had to buy all of the furniture in the entire house back from this pimp. So he ended up with no money. It's just absolutely mad.
I've got to say, it's not. I haven't seen this, and it's up until you mentioned you were going to be reviewing it, I hadn't even really looked at the plot. Yeah. I thought it was about like a young entrepreneur or something.
In a
way it is.
Kind of is,
but not in this way.
Just a very risky business, hence the title.
Business, yeah, I thought it was like a con man or something. I don't know.
I can tell you quite clearly, 100%, that we, the pair of us, are not the target audience for this movie whatsoever.
I don't know. I can surprise you.
The entire way through this movie, I was thinking, this was not meant for me.
It's not meant
it was
for me.
just, it's such a boy movie. It's got very cliche 80s moments in it. It made Tom Cruise, this movie, it really did. There's the key scene with him dancing in his shirt and underwear, and he was 21 when he made this, and it just set his career. There's no doubting at all that he's got charisma. He was going to go places. There's some interesting camera moves in it. Every time his parents are in his company, the camera takes his point of view, which was very interesting, and it kind of like showed you his viewpoint, like how he feels about his parents and how they feel about him, and they were very purposefully patronizing. The acting was was very purposefully done that way, and you just think, oh god, poor kid.
Yeah, it's kind of no wonder.
Yeah, exactly. And it was fun, I suppose, but it felt pretty cheap. I don't know, it was just one of those 80s movies. And I definitely wasn't the target audience for this. So I'm glad I can tick it off my list, but I will not be watching it again. It's not for me. Even though Tom Cruise is in it, it's very much about the women and wanting to be with the women. It was definitely not made for my eyes.
So it's still going well then. You've had a good run so far.
Yeah, the next one's better. Definitely better.
To finish on a high note.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
So go on, your next one then.
Right, okay. I must say, the last film here, it was the longest of the three. It's actually called The Longest Day. And I'm sure a lot of people will be familiar with this film. Not quite the longest film, but it's close. It comes in at an impressive 3 hours, so it's longer than Cloud Atlas, let's just put it that way. There's something about this. I'm going to have to try and put it into bite-sized chunks because, there was different directors and writers for different parts of this film. There's so many characters and locations, and it's in different languages. It represents so many different nationalities. So it's a big undertaking, and there's a lot to digest, especially on your first viewing, which for me, obviously, it was. So I'll try my best. So this is basically the retelling of June the 6th, 1944, which is D-Day.
Yeah.
And before it gets into the main swing of things, it starts in France, and there's a German field marshal preparing the beaches of Normandy for invasion. And he basically makes a comment that not a single Allied soldier will reach the shore. And he mentions that the first 24 hours of the invasion will be decisive. For the Allies as well as the Germans, it will be the longest day. And then you get your title. So that sets it up. It is very much the 24 hours leading up to and during the Normandy landings, basically.
Yeah.
I've managed to sectionalize it to 3 parts. Part 1 is set, I think, all on the day before the invasion, but there's big questions on both sides of the channel because at the moment the green light's not being given. So the Germans are intercepting coded messages. They're trying to predict when and where the Allied forces are going to attack and whether or not then they should be on alert. But it's all massively dependent on the weather. Even though it's June, the weather's been stormy and they reckon it's unlikely that an attack's coming. Someone makes a comment, why didn't they attack in May? The weather was perfect. But ultimately, they're saying we don't have anything to worry about. Eisenhower would never take the gamble. Meanwhile, on the other side, various Allied forces, you've got the British, the French, the American, the Canadians, they're all kind of dotted around. Actors like John Wayne and Richard Burton play colonels and officers.
Yeah.
But ultimately, there's thousands of soldiers and paratroopers, ships and planes, all waiting for the green light. They're itching to go. They say we're on the threshold of the most crucial day of our times. But likewise, they're waiting on the weather reports to say it's tonight. But they've already been repeatedly called off. So they're all in this bubble. Everyone, they know it's going to happen at some point. They just don't know when. So a decision needs to be made, and it is a gamble. But the longer they wait, the more the Germans can prepare. So they do it. And you can tell how much it means to all the different groups of people when they get the phone call, because they drop everything, and it speaks volumes about the anxiety that they're all facing.
Yeah.
Part 2 basically is in the night and the early hours of June the 6th, during which there's a load of action set pieces that unfold before the actual storming of the beaches itself, the things that you don't necessarily think about. All the component parts, like they blew up radio communications, they were dropping dummy paratroopers, derailing a train, everything they could to distract the Germans from the beaches. But also, this part takes time to show the more quieter moments of the people who are yet to arrive in France. So the more human side, whether it's a paratrooper who's struggling to secure his helmet because his hand's shaking, or one soldier's like pouring out all of his thoughts and doubts about his girlfriend back home to another soldier. And later, another guy asks, "Who's that guy you were talking to?" And he says, "No idea. I've never met him before." And the most poignant, in fact, maybe the most poignant line in the whole film is one of the officers, and he says to someone, "You remember every bit of it, because we're on the eve of a day that people will talk about long after we're dead and gone."
Yeah.
Which couldn't be any truer.
Yeah.
The other thing as well, a bit like Jeremiah Johnson in a way, there's moments of comedy all the way through this film.
Really? That's surprising.
It's quite a witty film, even though you'd think the subject matter shouldn't be. Just as an example, like the paratroopers, it's always been a worry that they're going to overshoot the drop zones and land in the villages instead of in the in the fields or wherever they're meant to. So when people they're dropping, they're landing in wells, they're falling on chicken coops, and going through people's greenhouses and things like that. It's quite amusing, and the film throughout mixes action, drama, and comedy. Again, makes it a little bit harder to sum up. And then part 3 is the part that you would expect, which is the arrival of the boats at the beaches at dawn. And oh my god, these action scenes do not let up for a very long time. The scale is
Really?
epic, and there's battles within battles, not just on the beaches, but in the town as well. There's a great set piece around a casino. Really good.
Wow.
It's basically a full-on war zone for the last hour and 15 minutes of the film, where cinematography plays a really big part. Lots of aerial shots, like there's bits where German planes are flying right over the beaches and firing down. And these are long takes.
Yeah.
And they're not far off what films like Dunkirk did very recently, and they're so ahead of their time. Other sequences play out war zones basically happening underneath while the camera just sort of glides over the top of them for a few minutes. It's very, very technically impressive. Special effects are great, explosions are everywhere, they're very realistic. And the sound design, I mean, I had to turn it down a little bit towards the end because I was like, okay, my ears are hurting now. But it really does immerse you in that moment in time, which obviously was something that you can't really imagine unless you were there.
Yeah.
But again, very witty moments. Sean Connery has a very brief appearance. You know, he comes out of the boats and he says, "Come out, you dirty slobs!" Falls flat on his face in the water. Some soldiers are putting earplugs in against not the sound of the bombing, but the sound of their own bagpipes. Bleeding Racket. I can't remember who they were, but some people were sending messenger pigeons and they fly the wrong way towards the Germans. And they go, "Damn traitors." Yeah, and the fact that it jumps between so many different perspectives, it works well in two ways, because it sort of demonstrates that not everybody had the same experience. At the end, two soldiers from completely different divisions cross paths.
Yeah.
And they say, "Well, he's dead, I'm crippled, you're lost. I've not fired my gun all day, I wonder who won." You know.
Yeah.
And as well, one of the things that my dad said appealed to him, and obviously this is the film from 1962 that I referred to at the beginning. He said that it's the film that made him take an interest in World War II.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to highlight that a lot of the film is about the strategy and the tactics and the planning, and the jumping of perspectives, you know, from both sides really does sort of give a bit of insight there. You know, it's educational, I suppose.
Yeah.
There's barely any music in this.
Really?
Yeah.
That's surprising for the time it was made, because that's usually the way it went, isn't it? You know, you had this big music orchestral thing that dramatic that came in with all the action. That's kind of what was expected in the 60s for that type of film.
The only thing you get is a repeated drum, which is dum, which I learnt during the film. That apparently that's Morse code for the letter V for victory.
Oh.
And then the thing it's really well known for is the cast.
Yeah.
The fact that even I know some of the names says something. Honestly, there's so many to the point where it's not even worth trying to keep up with who's who or which character's which character, because a lot of them are just cameos, and it's all general, lieutenant, officer, private, corporate, major, this, that, and I couldn't keep up. But I think it made sense that you're not meant to. You know, everybody's in the same pool. There's no main character as such. Even Henry Fonda appears as Teddy Roosevelt Jr. in one scene, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I will say, the film is brilliant, but in the first 5 minutes, there's a lot of weird problems. There's one shot where the German field marshal's walking along the beach, and then he literally disappears from the frame for about 7 seconds.
God.
And then he reappears back in the frame. It's quite random. He does just disappear. But apart from that, you can't deny. You'll watch this film and you'll be like, this is brilliant, you know.
Yeah.
Way ahead of its time, massive in scale, epic. Another 2 thumbs up.
It would mark my first John Wayne war film. I've seen quite a lot of his westerns. So yeah, it would it'd definitely be worth watching.
Yeah. Oh God, I can breathe now. That's a lot to take. I only watched it yesterday afternoon.
Yeah.
So between 5 o'clock and now, I've had to sort of work out what it is. I had to sort of piece it together.
Yeah.
Hopefully I did okay.
Okay, so the last movie then, the last one for me is Groundhog Day. Which was made in 1993. Bill Murray, Andy McDowell.
Yeah.
I actually really like this one. I'd seen it already a few times. You know, it's one that I really like. I should say though that I do not like Bill Murray really.
No,
I don't see the appeal.
I'm not a Bill Murray fan.
Yeah, I haven't really seen him in a lot of things. I've seen him in Ghostbusters. Don't really like him in Ghostbusters, to be honest.
He sort of plays a bit of a prick.
Yeah,
a lot of the time. Yeah. I don't know how else to say that.
Yeah, I think there's like this sarcastic, cynical kind of act.
Yeah.
And he seems to play that in a lot, and it just doesn't work for me. So I don't really like Bill Murray, but I like him in this.
Yeah, yeah.
I do not like Andy McDowell.
Oh, God.
I think she's an absolute drip.
There's 3 reasons I remember this film so well.
Yeah.
One is that it's the 2nd of February, which is my sister's birthday. The second is that it's set in Gobbler's Knob. And the third one is that it's Andy McDowell, who I absolutely want to punch in the face. Yeah, and for years I thought she was in Wham's music video for Last Christmas, and I've just learnt this week that it's not her. So I'm really sorry. That lady who looks just like Andy McDowell, I mean, I can only apologise, but, you know.
We were having this conversation, weren't we? And you were like, oh yeah, she's in that video. I was like, no, she's not.
She's
and you were like, yeah, she is. I was like,
convinced.
no, she's not.
My life has been a lie, Mary. You don't understand.
Yeah.
I'd be fine with her if she just invested in a comb or something. It's invasive. Sort it out.
Well, anyway, so I do not like Andy McDowell, really. I just like, she's got 2 big movies, hasn't she? This one and Four Weddings and a Funeral.
She's not an actress. I think that's what it is. She's not.
Yeah, she's like wooden, and it just. Though I have to admit, I do quite like her in this. She's okay in this, as far as as far as it goes. And I do like Bill Murray in this. So basically, the gist of this is it's a little bit like It's a Wonderful Life in a way. You've got this very cynical weatherman from Pittsburgh who kind of hates everything, doesn't particularly like himself, doesn't like anyone or anything. And he goes to Gobbler's Knob on
Don't we all?
the 2nd of February. Well, he literally goes here for the Groundhog Day, and Groundhog, it's supposed to come out and tell everybody whether they're going to have a longer winter or whether spring is coming, basically. And it's one of those absolutely ridiculous, crazy things that Americans do and do it every year. So he goes and he films his little piece as, the weatherman, and they're leaving. And this storm that he said was totally going to pass them by didn't pass them by, and he gets stuck there. And he then wakes up every day repeating that day.
Yeah.
Groundhog Day, for God only knows how many days, hundreds of days.
I think it's more. I think someone said it's like thousands. He spends thousands and thousands of days doing it.
Yeah. Somebody worked it out, I think, once. I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, he repeats the day an awful lot of times. So that's the premise, really. So something about the relationship between Phil and Rita at the beginning of this, I quite like, because it feels almost real.
Okay.
Like, he's got his sarcastic comments and taking the piss out of her, and she's telling him not to be so cynical, and, and it just kind of, it almost feels like real life. The first few scenes that they're in together. One of the great things about this film, it's got some brilliant cameos in it. Absolutely fantastic cameos. You've got Ned Ryerson, played by Stephen Tobolowsky. This made him very, very memorable part. He really made a lot of it.
Yeah.
You've got Larry the cameraman, played by Chris Elliott. Harold Ramis, who directed this. He appears as the doctor looking at his X-ray and then blinking repeatedly, like he's actually not really able to see it, and probably needs glasses, so you can't help him at all. So there's loads of cameos in this. Michael Shannon appears in this, really young Michael Shannon. And it's full with little cameos of people who just kind of appear a couple of times.
So the structure of it lends itself well to that, doesn't it? Because they do pop up for a moment in his day and then go away, but then come back and back.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things I think I like about this, and the reason it works well for me and like kind of endears me more to Bill Murray in this one, is it's a very witty script.
Right. Yeah.
Very witty dialogue. Like, just for example, he's on the phone at one point trying to get out of the town. He's like, what if there is no tomorrow? There wasn't one today. There's just like really clever little lines in there.
Sort of plays into his style of acting, though, isn't it? Like we just said.
Exactly. I would imagine there are probably quite a lot of people who like Groundhog Day who don't really like Bill Murray.
Yeah.
It's one of those stories that, it's kind of perfect. The plot works. It's the perfect length. Each part of it works really well. The script is great. It kind of all works really, really well. It's like lightning in a bottle, I think.
Yeah.
the way it's all staged is fantastic. So it really is in stages. You see his character arc through this. So, you know, you've got confusion and denial, and then throws caution to the wind in whatever he wants to do, uses his days like selfishly to learn how to get Rita, you know, learning all these things about her and then going off and doing them and repeating what she'd said to, you know, all that kind of thing. Then you get depression and multiple suicides.
This is what draws me most to the film, is that it, you know, it sets itself up as a comedy, but actually it becomes something that's inconceivably sad, I suppose.
Yeah, it's got a lot of dark stuff. Like all the best comedies, I think it does have points of drama in it, and the actual messages in it are more than just comedic. It's you know, it's quite profound.
They kind of highlight each other, don't they? If you've got both ends of the spectrum in your film.
Yeah, I find, for me, films that really I respond to are ones that have comedy and drama. It's probably one of the reasons I love Robin Williams so much, because he was a master at that.
Yeah.
So by the last kind of stage, really, is his mindset changing, and he decides to do good. And in doing that, becomes a selfless person, and he earns the right to be with Rita.
Right. Yeah.
And then his day ends, you know, this very long day ends. You know, he's become who he needed to become, and has earned her.
Yeah. I like
so
that aspect.
It's quite profound, really, and it's like he really had to go through this long journey to become this person, and it took him a long time to learn the lessons of what he should be doing with his time, how he should be acting, and you know, he actually changes as a person. It's quite realistic as well. You don't just think, oh well, you just all of a sudden changed. It is a very realistic progression. That's why I say it's staged very well, it's plotted very well. Each section feels as long as it should be. I think this is a really, really great film. It ended on a high note, but I knew it would. I waited until after because I knew I liked it.
1 out of 3.
Also because I knew that if I ran out of time to watch them, at least I've seen this one. So. But I absolutely thoroughly agree with my dad on this one. I do like this one a lot.
We got there.
We got there.
Yay.
We got through all 6.
Oh.
It was an experience.
Yeah, but saying that though, we don't review a lot of films that we don't like.
No, we don't. And look, I don't dislike the other 2 films.
Yeah.
I didn't dislike them. I gave them both 3 stars. I wouldn't say they were bad.
Out of 100.
I really, no, out of 5.
That's part of the novelty of doing an episode like this. You know, it's not what we would choose necessarily. But you can either be surprised one way or the other, I suppose.
Plus, it added 2 films to my list that I haven't seen, because recently I've been doing a lot of rewatches.
So have I.
A lot of new things for a while. So I'd say that was pretty successful, really.
Yeah, that went lightning quick. I don't know if it sounded lightning quick.
Should we discuss a little bit of news, Matt?
Yes.
There's 2 big things I'd like to say. One of them I've literally just seen pop up on Instagram. But firstly, I'm just going to start with the sad news that Ian Holm died the other day. Bilbo Baggins. He was 88, but obviously one of those cinema greats. Been around for decades.
Long time. I'm still really proud of my Bilbo is a Robo comment from the Alien episode.
So that's sad. My other bit of news is not sad, and I'm pretty sure you won't care one jot about this piece of news.
Okay.
I'm very pleased. It has been announced that there is actually a 3rd Mamma Mia movie being made.
Oh, right.
And it might have new ABBA songs in it.
New ABBA songs? Like newly written ones?
Newly written ones.
Oh, God.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
So, I mean, I'm not sure how I feel about that, because, you know, you want to listen to the greats, don't you? But the fact that there is a 3rd one, I've loved both of the others. So that's my big, exciting, happy news. Yeah.
Okay. I've got a couple of other bits. This one baffles me. That Kristen Stewart has signed on to play Princess Diana.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. Who cast that movie? I hate Kristen Stewart. It's no lie. I can't like her. I've tried.
It's by the same director as Jackie, when Natalie Portman played Jackie Kennedy, which was brilliant. And it's from the writer of things like Locke and Allied, Peaky Blinders.
All quality things, really, when you actually think about it.
Yeah, I can't not see it in terms of look. What I can't see is her speaking and performing
No.
like.
I mean,
like
she's
her.
like a board of wood. She doesn't show emotion. She has no emotion.
She doesn't have appeal.
She's like a robot. Cannot get him on board with her. I really can't.
We'll see. This might work for you though. Not the Disney version, but Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio.
Yes, I heard about this.
So Ewan McGregor, it says here, will be voicing Jiminy Cricket, but he said he's actually already done the voice recording for it.
Oh.
And this is like a stop motion animation version of Pinocchio. Dark in the sense that Pan's Labyrinth was dark for Netflix. So that should be interesting.
I am intrigued by this. I love stop motion anyway. I really do. I love anything like that.
Yeah.
So I'm quite intrigued by what he'll create here. But on the other side of it, like Jiminy Cricket,
you really like Pinocchio.
It's like he's iconic, isn't it? And the voice, and it's one of those you're gonna have to like dispel all of the things that you already know.
I'm potentially thinking that it's going to be not the character in the traditional set. I think it might be like a dark devil on the shoulder kind of thing.
Yeah, they might do something different with it.
No idea. The only other thing is typical, really, because we finished our last episode talking about the lockdown and saying that cinemas weren't opening and awards were all up in the air. Seconds after we posted the episode, obviously. So Cineworld has announced it's reopening on the 10th of July. I haven't read the details yet of how they're going to do it or if they've even announced that yet.
I've seen a few little things. I've had an email sent. So there's going to be, the cleaning stations paying by card payments and booking online. And from what I could tell from the seating, it is definitely going to be split. And from what I could see, they'd like put up an example of a picture, and it was like 2 seats together, and then there'd be a skipped row, but then there'd be 3 or 4 together, so they're obviously going to be taking groups of like families together, but then there'll be gaps between. So I would imagine they're going to be deciding who and where people are going to be sitting.
And quieter environments to sit in. And the last one then was the awards, because straight after we posted last week.
Yes.
So the Oscars, they have confirmed that their window of eligibility has been extended, so it now goes from January 2020, just gone, all the way up to the end of February, and the ceremony will therefore be 2 months later, Sunday the 25th of April. Something that the BAFTAs have also copied. Theirs will be on the 11th of April. With a wider window, so that's interesting. It's only 2 months extra though.
It's been the beginning of March at the very latest. Usually it's February, so
it'll be different.
It will be different. I don't think it'll be significantly different though.
No, I think it's more the time of year it is. It's usually snowing.
Yeah, exactly. It's just going to feel a little bit different.
Yeah, it's my birthday weekend.
It is. You're going to have a hell of a weekend.
I know. Just hope I get everything watched.
Quite exciting.
It's different.
Yeah.
Definitely different. Yeah.
So that's the news.
That's the news. We haven't recommended a film to our dads or to anybody.
No, we haven't.
You forgot.
Gosh, for me this week, I did forget.
Oh dear.
For me this week, I think I would have to recommend The Imitation Game with Benedict Cumberbatch. Watch that with my husband this week. It's just one of those eye-opening films. It's about Alan Turing, who he was an absolute genius at mathematics and computing, and pretty much put us on the path for creating what we now know as computers and technology in as early as the 1940s. And the reason he is famous, but only became famous when the record became public, was that he created the machine that helped break the Enigma code and helped us win the war. And it's been said that he, through his work, ended the war at least 2 years early.
Right, yeah.
than it could have been,
Mhm.
which saved however many millions of lives
Yeah.
in multiple countries. But we didn't know anything about it, and he was a gay man in Britain when it was illegal to be so, and actually committed suicide in 1952 because he'd been put on drugs. Basically, it was hormonal castration.
That's fun.
Basically,
Yeah.
it's absolutely barbaric.
Mm.
And he was given a pardon, a posthumous pardon, and celebrated in, I think it was
It's not long
like
ago, but
2013 or
yeah,
something. Yeah,
few years
it
ago.
was about 40, 50 years after the point, and a little bit too late if you ask me. But it's just eye-opening to see what he created and how Bletchley Park worked, and
Yeah, I like that
the
part.
tension that was on these men,
Mhm.
because every day that they weren't able to crack it was another day that more men were dying.
Yeah.
It's a really good film,
Mhm.
really, really
Yeah.
well made. It came out the same year as The Theory of Everything,
Yeah.
so that's my recommendation. I definitely would give that a go.
I do like that one a lot. I don't know. I don't know whether. I think last time we sort of recommended films to our mum, so I've tried to think of one that maybe my dad would want to watch, and I thought maybe I'd recommend Unforgiven from 1992, but I don't know if you've already seen it, so you'll have to let me know. That's the Clint Eastwood, Morgan Freeman, Gene Hackman one. But instead, I thought we were putting together a list of our top movie dads, which should have been published by the time you're listening to this episode.
Yes.
And one of the ones I was going to include, but decided not to, I thought I might as well make use of it, and I'll talk about it here instead. And that's Prisoners from 2013.
Loved that film.
Yeah, there weren't many good films from that year, but this is one of them.
I really did love that film. I did.
Yeah.
I remember coming out of it and I was just being like
A bit shaken.
shocked. Yeah. And a bit like it was very dark.
But ultimately, I thought after watching it, I can't, in all good conscience, put a man who captures and tortures a potentially innocent boy, I suppose, on the list of best movie dads. Although he meant well.
He did mean well.
Yeah. In a nutshell, it's Hugh Jackman and Maria Bello, and then Viola Davis and Terrence Howard. They play parents of two girls that go missing, but the owner of a nearby RV becomes the prime suspect. But he's got the IQ of a 10-year-old and he denies all knowledge, so there's a lot of frustrations and the distress, and the parents are, especially Hugh Jackman, who's like the main character, trying to do everything he can to get answers.
Yeah.
And Jake Gyllenhaal plays Detective Loki.
He's fantastic in it. Like little ticks and things that he gives the character are just brilliant.
The other one is Paul Dano, who's good at playing quite quirky characters, but he plays this suspect Alex very well too. He's creepy and menacing, but also sort of innocent, and it's a very fine balance. And yeah, the film really does keep me guessing. So if you haven't seen Prisoners, what the hell are you doing? Listen to us. You should go and watch.
I know.
Prisoners.
Go watch it now.
Yeah, just put it on. Well, I'm exhausted now.
So Matt, that's it. Where can they find us?
Well, you can find us on our website, www.cinechat.co.uk/podcast, or on any social media platform, probably CineChat Podcast, CineChat Pod, or CineChat_official. I have to put that bit in there as like a fail-safe.
Probably.
Well, because there's probably something. We're not on like MySpace, for example. You know.
Probably find us in most places.
Or you can email us at
podcast@cinechat.co.uk. And that's it.
Yeah, next episode, we're celebrating the 35th anniversary of Back to the Future.
Yes.
I assume we'll be looking at the whole trilogy. We might as well.
Yes, of course.
They go hand in
hand.
hand.
They do.
So, yeah, it's a lot of people's favourites, that. So, if it's yours, tune in then.
So, it's goodbye for me.
Yeah, and it's goodbye from me. I'm going to have a lie down.